Welcome to the Grid Podcast, episode 20. Our goal is to educate and to bring hard-hitting truths about America's critical infrastructure. I'm your host, Maria Sumnicht. A quick disclaimer, political opinions expressed in the podcast by participants are their opinion and not necessarily that of the Grid Podcast. Please subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell so you can be notified when we go live. This helps promote the channel on YouTube. Well, today's topic is a very timely topic and podcast with everything that has transpired over the past week in the Middle East. Our topic today is household and community resilience. We welcome Steve Volandt back to the Grid Podcast. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Maria. Great to be here.
So Steve is the president of the Foundation for Infrastructure Resiliency. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about the foundation and your work there?
Sure. Thanks, Maria. That's a great way to start off. So the Foundation for Infrastructure Resilience is a nonprofit. We started it in mid-2024, and it picks up on work that most of us were doing inside the nonprofit called InfraGard, which is sponsored by the FBI. We started the Foundation for Infrastructure Resilience. We like to call it FIR, F-I-R, because we have more freedom there than being part of an entity that's sponsored by the federal government. So we're allowed to, at FIR, we're allowed to interact more easily and freely with government representatives without feeling like we've got to represent the official FBI perspective or need their permission. So we've found it to be very empowering, and we got a great start with an InfraGard, and owe them a lot of thanks. You can just go to fir.foundation, fir.foundation, and that's our website. What is our mission? In plain English, our mission is to focus on the 16 critical infrastructures in the United States as identified by the federal government and their vulnerabilities. Particularly their vulnerabilities to hostile nation states or other entities that would like to constrain our economy or harm our ability to deploy our armed forces because they've turned off the power. So imagine if you could almost hit a little toggle switch and turn the power off in the southeast, or the power off in California, or the water supply off, or turn off the banking, or turn off other critical infrastructure. We do know, and this is public information, that entities like China actually have that capability. They are thoroughly embedded in our infrastructure through cyber means. This has been testified to Congress by the FBI director himself. So it's not a conspiracy theory; it's a fact. So it's kind of like a big game of chicken. Can they do it to us? Yes, but what would we do back? So it's that there's that game of risk that they play with us and we play with them, etc. So with that context, we do have. Before I roll into, I want to give the audience kind of the why, the so what, as to what, why would you be concerned about what's going on what in the world, and how should that affect your thinking about being home in your local community? And we've got a good body of knowledge on the FIR website as far as getting ready at home and helping your local community be ready, particularly with your particular household. But it's like, well, why would I worry about that? And most of the information that the general public receives doesn't give them cause to really change their behavior and do more than the average American has 3.5 days of groceries in their house. And unless you've got warning of a hurricane coming in or something like that, they don't act, go to the store, for an ice storm. But with recent events, everybody's watching the news. We took out Maduro in Venezuela, and now we're going after Iran. And there's a theme to that I think I could help the audience with a little bit of sense making. But what we're doing is, as we're confronting these challenges, we're stirring the pot, and we're going to motivate our adversaries to act sooner versus later. And one of our primary strength is nobody's going to beat our military one-on-one. So why fight the military if you can turn off our power? And it's there's been some motion in this country to harden the power supplies to our military bases, but it's not complete. So if we're thinking about a land invasion and you're massing all those forces to say like we did to push Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait, we were we were deploying out of military bases like Fort Bragg and Camp Lejeune, and they needed that local power supply so everything would work, so they could get those troops together, they could get them on the buses, get them to the airports, get them to the ships and get them rolling. If that power was off, they couldn't do that. So that's a theme that we focus on. Any other thoughts you'd like to add or questions before I move
I
on?
know you put it kindly. I say we kicked a hornet's nest with
Oh,
what we did in Iran and both Venezuela. So
we
what does
did.
that mean to the American people? I mean, I think that's not what's being communicated
No,
anymore.
it's not. So you're right. We kicked two hornets' nests, but they're somewhat conjoined, and even they're going after the cartels in Mexico as part of this. So what the mainstream news, mainstream media doesn't report is they don't report things in context, and they don't do a good job reporting things holistically. So you get a lot of stories that are very exciting to watch, kind of like a brief sporting event snippet, but they even though they know the whole story, they're smart people. They've got big budgets. They don't tell you the whole story because they want you to tune in next time. And they're in the entertainment business. They're in the business of selling advertising. As much as you love whatever news channel you watch, their business model is entertainment and selling advertising, and their income comes from the advertisers. They don't want to disrupt those advertisers. So if you look at who's advertising on the mainstream media, they're typically the kinds of advertisers that really wouldn't want the general public to worry about existential threats to the United States because they'd spend their money differently and they'd spend their lifestyle differently. But so when you stitch it all together, what's the cartels in Mexico are are linked to the Maduro regime in Venezuela. That is linked to the Iranians, as well as the Chinese and the Russians, and by extension, North Korea. So they're all doing business together, and they all help each other like a loose coalition. They're not solid business partners or as tight as allies as we are with NATO, but they have mutually supportive interests. So if for example, if you were Iran and you wanted to slip some Hamas guys across the border, who would you hire to do that? The cartels already have all that figured out. They're already managing and governing the human trafficking there, whether it's across the southern border or by other means. So if they have a business relationship. We know in Venezuela, the Maduro regime was allied with drug cartels as well as with the Iranian military, Russians, uh, also, and the Chinese, and they produce a lot of oil there. They've got the largest proven oil reserves of any nation in the world, more than Saudi Arabia, more than we do. Um, it's not the best quality crude, but they were part of laundering Russian oil that's sanctioned into the global markets, and also they were one of the big. I think China was their primary buyer of oil. So they were supplying the Chinese economy with the oil. I think virtually all of the Iranian oil was sold to China, sanctioned oil. So China was getting this sanctioned oil kind of at a discount, and so they've got their own business, side enterprise that kind of skirts the global economy. So these things have been festering and growing for a long time. We've been becoming encroached upon by these these forces for decades, and it's this current administration, the Trump administration, has decided to act, and do some serious pushback. Diplomacy hasn't seemed to give us the room that we were looking for, so they were going for it. We saw what happened with the cartels in Mexico, after the Maduro regime fell. That's going to cascade Cuba into probably economic bankruptcy because they were being propped up by oil out of Venezuela. So all these things are connected. So how does it affect the Iranian situation and the events that are unrolling in the Middle East today. Um, the the Iranians, um, the Russians, the Chinese, North Koreans all have very solid cyber uh, tentacles into this country and into our infrastructure in different means. Chinese by far the best. The Iranians have been focused mostly on water supplies. It's a way for them to provide their version or a version of kind of we can get you back by other means, or we can stop you from doing things by harming your infrastructure. So I think that's kind of a bottom line up front about what I wanted to talk today. I do believe that given current events that our infrastructure is very much at risk just from cyber alone. Um, the the other thing I'm concerned about are the proxy forces that Iran has placed or has relationships with that are in placed inside the United States. Um, there has been last December 25, the federal government did announce publicly in congressional testimony that they estimate 18,000 Islamist fighters are active in the United States. That's a pretty big number. We've calculated in the foundation that guys with guns, less than 1,000 guys with guns could shoot all the major transformer substations in the country within 2 days. It takes 3 years to replace a transformer typically. So if all of them were shot up, how long would it take to replace them? So those 18,000 guys could create a lot of havoc. So those are some of the threats and risks, but I just want to give it some greater context from a global perspective before I get into that. The we're we're in a global ecosystem of proxy forces and expendable proxies. So if you kind of trace it all forward, and if you if you recall, and I guess I'll talk about it kind of chronologically in a bit. China is the biggest strategic competitor that we have, without doubt. The media is starting to talk a little bit more about it, but China is absolutely becoming a pure adversary, and their intentions are not just to be partners with us to help have everybody have a great capitalist life around the world. Their intention is to dominate the globe, and guess who's in their way? We are.
Yep.
So that's just an unfortunate fact, or to reuse a term, that's an inconvenient truth for a lot of the narratives out there. So China has done an amazing job. It blows my mind when you really assess how far they've infiltrated our economy, our technology, our um, our culture, etc. But China has a philosophy where they avoid direct confrontation for as long as possible, and this goes all the way back to Sun Tzu, the warrior philosopher from over 2,000 years ago. And if he read his book, if The Art of War, it's excellent. But the general approach is if you can win a battle without having to actually fight, then that's the ultimate art of war. And so what China has done over the last so many years is they've set the table to where they're almost there. Um, so they can do it. I mentioned their cyber tentacles into our infrastructure, which is very well documented, and we're going to have some links to some threat resources, threat information I know you're going to share as part of this podcast. But the China will also use proxy forces. So if they can manipulate Iran or give intelligence to Iran to empower them to be more of a thorn in our side or more of an adversary to us, that's good for China. In Iran, it was quite the puppet master with proxies. They were very influential in Syria. They have the Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is in between Syria and Israel. Then to the south of Israel, they have Hamas, and with Hamas and Hezbollah, and then the Houthis further south in Yemen, these were all funded and armed with missiles and a lot of weaponry coming out of Iran, and it's really gave Iran a kind of a stranglehold in the Middle East. So if we've been watching the news, the first thing that happened was the Syrian government fell, and we recognized kind of a controversial guy that had been an Islamist. He kind of disavowed that, but the convenient thing for us was that Iran was booted out. of Syria. That was their way that they would supply Hezbollah, which dominates Lebanon. Hezbollah was firing a bunch of missiles into Israel, and they were posing to do a ground attack. Israel did their amazing thing, blew up pagers and radios, and just kind of shut them down. And then Israel defeated Hamas, another Iranian proxy. Meanwhile, the Houthis are firing missiles at shipping coming through through the Red Sea area, and we went there to help stop that. We spent a lot of multi-million-dollar munitions shooting down a lot much cheaper munitions there. So how does all that fit together with the blended threat of Iran plus China? We have, and you can look this up on the internet, but we have a very limited stock of sophisticated weapons that shoot in the air and can knock down drones or aircraft or ballistic missiles. So if we're giving them to Israel and 2,000-pound bombs to Israel to fight Iranian proxies, and then we're also shooting at the Houthis, which is an Iranian proxy, we're using up those weapon stocks faster than our factories make them. Now, how is this good for Russia? Well, that we don't have them to give to the Ukraine. So then Europe has to start draining their stocks. That's good for Russia too. So now NATO's being drawn down because we in Israel are being bogged down with these proxies. The proxies are again tied to Iran, which is in league with Russia and China. Why is this good for China? China, it's obviously in the news, even in the entertainment news that we all watch. They've got their eyes on Taiwan. Who is going to stop them there? We are. What would we stop them with? The very things that we're using up against the Houthis, and now that we're using up against Iran itself. So this is good for Russia. It's good for China because we have less to share. Um, is it going to dwindle us down enough for China to feel like the time is now to act on Taiwan? I don't think so right now. I think they've got some more economic objectives before they pull that thread, and I don't think they're quite that confident yet. We've seen a lot of news or information that they're kind of aiming for about a year from now, spring of 27. So, they're very planning oriented. So the way all this is connected now that we've taken on Iran directly and their proxies, so China's happy with that. Russia's happy with that, even though they're seeing an ally getting crushed. We're using up our stuff, and we're after the Cold War, the United States made a decision that we would be unable to fight two major wars, two major fronts at the same time. We can just do one, and so we're in one. At least from an air and naval perspective, we're not massing ground forces there, which I'm glad of. Uh, so in response to the killing of the supreme leader of Iran, the Iranian Shia Muslim religious community has issued a fatwa, F-A-T-W-A, which is kind of like a Supreme Court ruling in a way, but it has action. And they've issued a fatwa that they're asking for all Muslims, but in particular their fellow Shiites, to go after the West and all of our allies in every country that we've got military bases in. And I think they've got at least a $40 million price tag on whoever assassinates President Trump gets 40 million bucks. And so they've opened it up almost like a um, kind of a movie where now it's not just the Shiites, but anybody that wants to take out Trump is eligible for a $40 million commission. So they've put it that way, and they've asked as part of this fatwa. They've demonstrated that already that they're going after the infrastructure in the other Middle Eastern countries as payback. We're going to wreck your economy. We're going to go after infrastructure. I haven't seen anything yet that they've destroyed the desalination plants. I don't know how some of those cities over there will survive without their water plants. But following that mentality, they've got 18,000 people here. So I'm blown away that we've only had that one incident down in Austin, Texas, where that guy was wearing an Iranian T-shirt. So he was probably likely responding to that fatwa as a lone wolf attacker. But where are the organized guys? And our FBI, our
Right.
intelligence folks are just staying up all night long figuring this out. But I'm amazed that so that's telling me that they're getting ready. But the reason we haven't seen it is because they haven't decided to do it yet. And if they go for it in physical attacks, um, I think about the Australian Bondi Beach shooting, just shooting people, having a nice day at the beach. Um, what kind of targets would they take? I think they would definitely work to make people feel very unsafe in the United States and as well as other countries. But if they want to stop our military, they can stop it by harming our infrastructure, which would cause long-term power outages or banking outages or telecommunications outages or major water utility outages. And our, people don't know. When I first went in the Marine Corps in the mid '80s, military bases pretty much all had their own coal plants, and you go there and you see these giant piles of coal. And if I remember right, they always kept 60 days of coal on these military bases. And as the environmental laws progressed, these coal plants weren't scrubbed. It was the Department of Defense decided it was too expensive to comply with EPA regulations. They were just going to plug into the bigger grid, which is great news to the power companies. They get big customers, and just not worry about maintaining a coal plant on your base anymore. But now they're connected to the same grid that's just as vulnerable for every other reason I described. And the military bases have lost, by and large, they've lost that ability to generate their own power. There's some motion to get small modular nukes there. Some are trying to microgrid themselves or have accomplished it, but we're just not there. So it's I'm not betraying any national secrets. This is all, especially with AI, you can look all this stuff up. That you want to stop our military from deploying, you hit our infrastructure. So if you hit our infrastructure, it's not just going to affect our military, which is strategic. It's going to affect us at home.
Correct.
And so let me see. Maybe now's a good time to see if there's any questions you think are worth
Uh,
responding to.
we have at FJ Farrar. I am an anti-terrorism expert and teach it today. Mentioned to say that I'm concerned about the potential for violent action from terrorist organizations, sleeper cells, and homeland terrorist actions. And I think Steve talked to that a bit just right now. And yes, I would say that's should be the country's number one concern on the homeland. Um,
Yeah, these guys are organized now. I've seen other information that shows, in the past, the Shiites and the Sunni Muslims were very divided. They were adversaries, and they didn't collaborate. But what I've been reading more recently is that they've teamed up. They've kind of buried the hatchet, and they are collaborating, and they're in league through various forums like the Muslim Brotherhood, and so they're looking for opportunity, right, to to uh, to earn their money. And when you think about, and I learned this taking a class at Marine Corps Command and Staff, these terrorist organizations they're businesses. They're like a nonprofit, and so people don't think of them that way. They have a business model, and
yeah,
they need events as a fundraiser. They don't necessarily always want to ruin their enemy. They're parasitic and financially. They need to stir things up enough so that it's a fundraising event for them, and it's a recruiting event. Gets their messaging out. So okay. Any other questions before I start to pivot a little bit?
yeah. Let's go through this. Let's see. David Anderson says overwhelming U.S. force against Iran is showing the world that a low orbiting satellite hemp attack is one of the last remaining options to effectively attack the U.S. cyber. Um, is concerning as well. I don't know if you want to talk to that one too.
North Korea's got two satellites that orbit over us every day. They come up from the South Pole. They don't orbit in a standard pattern. All of our um, anti-ballistic missile defenses are kind of aimed towards the North Pole, where we'd expect them coming from Russia. So there's been a lot of debate over what's inside these North Korean satellites, but they could contain small nuclear weapons. In order to create a high altitude electromagnetic pulse event,
Hmm.
uh, you want it sort of a low orbit. It needs to be at the edge of the atmosphere where it can excite those electrons. If there was a nuclear weapon inside one of those satellites, yeah, it could trigger an EMP event. Those electrons would come out, at the speed of light. The gamma rays come out of the bomb. It doesn't have anything to blow up. It just blows up in outer space. It produces a lot of gamma radiation. That gamma radiation hits the edge of the atmosphere, strips the electrons uh, off their atoms, and then they fly down through the Earth's magnetic field, which creates electricity. So it's a very rapid pulse. When it hits things that are electronic, that very rapid pulse creates shorts, fries some electronics, especially in small metal things. So there's three pulses in an electromagnetic pulse or a HEMP. There's an E1, E2, and E3. The E1 is what I just described. The E2 behaves like lightning, and we've got a lot of lightning surge arresters. And then the E3 behaves like a solar storm. I think with the HEMP, it would last about 20 minutes to an hour and create a lot of ground-induced currents on long metal things like high high power transmission lines or railroad tracks, which also could affect our electrical infrastructure. So yeah, if they've got two of those up there at the right altitude at the right time, they could cause a great harm to a big part of the country and in effect create what we call a black sky event, which is most or all of the country is out of power. The question is for how long? And while maybe the transformers in this case may not all be fully damaged, but the control systems and a lot of the electronics that are used to manage the electrical grid would would be harmed. And so we'd be, in addition to the grid's load, just because the grid is operating, it can't function unless somebody's using that power. So if all the users are kind of knocked offline and damaged, short circuited, then the grid is kind of useless. So that could cause cascading outages even if just all the users were knocked off. So yeah, we do have that as a risk, and that's from North Korea. I think they've developed a submarine, and you could also throw these things on Scud missiles off a cargo ship, right, just
Right.
off our coast, or put it in a balloon for crying out
Put it
loud. We saw that
a white balloon that
a
crosses the
big
whole
a big
country.
weather balloon, yeah, that are up there. They're at the right height also.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, and then one more. It's a comment from Dave Moran, and he says all aspects of the power grid, including communications, control, and computing technologies, need to be addressed. And wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, we've got some folks, and we've started up a new task force inside the foundation for microgrids, which means basically you've walled off a piece of the grid for more local use. It could be a building, it could be a campus, it could be a city, but microgrid means it would be, I'll use this my term, loosely coupled to the larger grid. So if the larger grid goes down, the microgrid still is still functional. But right now, where our grid isn't structured that way. It's structured to where it's all supporting other pieces of it. So there's all this load balancing that goes on across all these load balancing authorities. And so if there's heavy use in one area, more power is pushed from another area. That's the general design. The electrical grid in the United States is in three big interconnects. There's an eastern one, a western one, and then one called ERCOT, which is really centered around Texas. If you remember a few years ago, they had that big snowstorm and ice storm, and that Texas went down. Um, the way Texas set up ERCOT, they don't have the interconnects powerful enough to kind of replace it if they have a catastrophic loss. It's really there just to help them balance the load. So we weren't able to push enough power into Texas to overcome that. But generally, that's the idea. And in one of the videos, it's a 60-minute video on our website. Um, they talk about just these interconnections between these big interconnects. There's it's debatable, it could be 9. Some say there's 11 that really matter. Just the loss of those would drastically destabilize our electrical grid and probably cause rolling brownouts. So our electrical grid is set up in this just-in-time load balancing way, and the the daytime markets and the minute by minute markets that sell power all monetize that. And it's very different from the way that the Ukrainian grid was designed, for example. So I just want to really make this contrast. Um, and Tom Popick from the Foundation for Resilient Societies does a great job explaining this. But if I'm going to try to remember how he explained it. We know that Russia has been trying to destroy the Ukrainian power grid as part of their strategy. So, of course, it's in everybody's war plans if they want to come after us, destroy our grid. Why have they been so unsuccessful in the Ukraine? Why is it they've been at it for 4 years? The during the Ukrainian grid was built during the Soviet Union days. It was built to export power to the broader Soviet Union. So it was overbuilt for just the country of Ukraine's use. And even up to the day of the Soviet invasion, they were exporting power, I believe, into Russia. So it was built, I think, 4x, 4 times. It produced 4 times the power than the Ukrainian economy required. So number one, it was overbuilt times four. Number two, it was built to survive a war with NATO. So it was hardened. They built the Ukrainian grid to survive being bombed and still function. So given that it was times four, 4x, and it was built to survive a war with NATO, that's why Russia's had such a hard time destroying it. Plus, it's old and it was more analog. It lacked a lot of the electronics that would allow a more useful cyber attack. Our grid, in contrast, is not built to survive any war. It's capitalist. It's built to be just enough for the minimum investment and then the risk management that covers the usual things like ice storms, hurricanes, earthquakes, but nothing that you'd call, quote, an act of God or an act of war. So it's kind of barely there. Um, for these kinds of additional insults. Insurance doesn't cover it. Our national policy doesn't cover for it. So it's a big juicy target.
Yep. One more, there's a couple more comments, but it says, how about building out an HVDC infrastructure to bring back online from a black sky event?
So high voltage, direct current.
Current, yeah.
Well, I guess it's all about money and rights of way.
Hmm.
So where would you put it? And I guess if you did it locally as part of a microgrid, that could make sense. But if you're going to go high voltage DC, you'd if you think about. So I've dabbled in data center site development planning, and just getting the permissions. And look at some of the news now; it's kind of anti-data center because of the power requirements. Nobody, people don't want things in their backyard, so they don't want nuclear power plants in their backyard. They don't want data centers in their backyard. They don't want high voltage lines in their backyard, whether they're alternating current or direct current. So we can talk about the technical viability of things, but then you've got to deal with public pushback and local politics. The other thing about our electrical grid is it's not governed by any kind of federal unified apparatus. It's state by state. We've got FERC and we've got NERC, but it's really a state by state thing. So you've got different rules in different states. So we have a very non-homogeneous environment. So and it's not governed top down. The federal government doesn't. It's not directive when it comes to our grid. So as much as we can think of good approaches, we're not structured for that.
Yeah. And before we pivot to the community readiness and household readiness, I wanted to mention something because Steve, when I mentioned it to him, he didn't know about it. But Iran and China are very closely tied. And there is a rail route connecting Western China directly to Tehran. It's known as the Silk Road Train, or the New Silk Road Economic Belt. And it actually was completed here last year in 2020, May 25th, 2025. And it actually goes from China to Iran through Kyrgyzstan to Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. So they did this in order to strategically circumvent international trade sanctions. So we really don't know what is going back and forth on this train. And I would imagine that it would have been a strategic target during our air raids, but nonetheless, things have been moving, equipment, people, troops, who knows what. And this is stuff that's been going on sort of under the radar between these two countries. So I don't know if you want to add to that.
It facilitates their ability to supply things to Iran that we can't track. So what could that be?
Right.
Hopefully not nuclear weapons um, or weapons of mass destruction, but it certainly allows them to circumvent any kind of sanctions, and it goes both ways. So, but
Exactly.
it's all part of China has been relentless. You've got to admire they've been relentless. They've embedded themselves in our through cyber means. They've got hundreds of thousands of people here in our workforce that if they don't cooperate with the Chinese government, their families are bad things happen to their family back in China, so they're basically blackmailable. China has a police force that goes around the world and enforces Chinese desires on Chinese people that don't live in China. That's I think they had their own police station in New York City for a
They
while before
they
we
did while I
busted it.
was there.
So yeah, so they're just amazing, and so they're quite an adversary. I only hope as in all dictatorships that they tend to be kind of brittle, crumbly, and hollow on the inside because of their brutality and the way that they treat people. And so they may look really strong on the outside, but they tend to be kind of hollow and rotten on the inside. So I hope that's the case. Okay, so a little bit more on background. So we're squeezing China on oil now. They I did a little bit of homework on this before today's talk. So what caused the Imperial Japanese government to attack Pearl Harbor? We were sanctioning them. So does this sound familiar? We were sanctioning the Japanese government, and we were blocking their ability to get oil. And so they attacked Pearl Harbor. I mean, I'm compressing a lot down into a few sentences, but they have what they were granted what I call the gift of desperation. They got to a point where they were so desperate they had to do something, and the something they were going to do was not what we wanted them to do. They weren't going to submit to us, so they were desperate enough to go for it, and they did. And and so where was Venezuela's oil going? China.
China.
Where was Iran's oil going? China. So what does China need more than we need as far as importing oil? They need it more than we do.
Mhm.
We could almost be self-sufficient if we had to be. So I did some homework, and it's not as black and white as you'd think. From what I looked up, China, there's about 4 or 5 months of oil already en route to China in tankers, and they've been stockpiling because they've been getting prepared for a disruption for whatever whether we did it or it was something in the Middle East. So so with with that, is that going to push them more into a gift of desperation? And would it and if China is in the proxy business, could it motivate China to be a little bit more helpful to Iran so that Iran could be a little bit more helpful to their proxies that are here to put a little bit more of a hurt on us? I think all these things, a reasonable person would go, yeah, that could kind of make sense. And so we are in a tricky time, and that's why the timing is great to have this talk. It is important to be ready at home just in case any of this transpires, and I hope it doesn't. But we've been talking about being ready at home for quite a while, and why we could be taken advantage of and turned off by adversaries. But I think with world events today, it's more compelling. Can I share my screen for a minute?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead and share. We're
All right.
you have to. hit that little share button. There you go.
Okay,
There we
so
go.
this is the foundation website. I just want to orient the audience. If you just go to the FIR.foundation, and then you can click on Understand Our Vulnerabilities. And there's some great videos here. Maria and I tried to do this talk a month or so ago, and I wanted to play these videos, but the YouTube shut us down. So, but I'm not making this stuff up that I'm sharing with you guys. This is very well documented. I think nobody would say that 60 Minutes is a conspiracy theory uh, source. So I encourage you to go there and watch the videos, and then you can also just click here to go home. You can also look at how we're organized. We've got some great task forces, and we're going to focus today on the Household and Community Readiness Task Force. So if you click there, and we've got some great leadership there, Mike Pointer and Fred Farrar. At the bottom, if you keep scrolling, there's some resources there. And I'm going to show these slides, but I'm going to show them today using PowerPoint. But I did a household and community readiness uh, series of classes in my backyard with my local church, and they gave us some good questions that I think are good questions for general citizens. So we took their Q&A and then we staffed it inside the foundation and came up with some good answers. But just based on water is a big deal. So you, I'll get into that a little bit today. The most important thing you want to think about at home is water, more than food. People don't really think about it. And I'm not just talking about buying a case of bottled water, but think about being able to provide yourself water for an extended period. Um, so now I'm going to shift over to my slide deck. I'm not going to go in slideshow mode, Maria, unless you think I need to. I'll just
It's
increase
fine.
the screen. Um, so people that have heard me talk about this in the past, they'll hear me say a lot about a get-home bag, not a bug-out bag, a get-home bag. And why do you want to get home? Because if you're really trying to go a long distance, and we truly have a black sky event, think about if the power's out through half the country or all the country. If you think you're going to get on the road and drive across a couple states or halfway across your state, do you really think that's going to happen? Are you going to be able to pump gas at a gas station that's out of power? What kind of people are you going to run into, and what's their gift of desperation going to be when you're in the middle of nowhere and there's no street lights, there's no power anywhere, and you're running down the road and they see your headlights on? So I don't recommend trying to go bug out too far, but if you happen to not be close to home, you want to get home and you want to be ready at home. So you definitely want to focus on the fundamentals, and you do need to get your head in the right space. This would be a really bad day for America if we have this kind of a situation, even if it's just regional. Imagine you're shopping at the shopping mall near you and you're 50 miles away from home, and power's out, street lights are out, there's gridlock, um, the and you got to walk home. 50 miles is further than you think. Um, I've done two 50-mile ultra marathons. I trained 10 months for each of them. All I was carrying was me and a water bottle, and it was really super hard. And I wasn't the fastest. I was one of the slowest. I just wanted to see if I could do it. It took me about 12 hours. The second one was about 10 hours to go 50 miles, and I was a wreck. My blistered up, and I trained for it for months. So it's a bigger deal than you think. So you want to be able to get home. Um, and again, you can download these slides from our site. So if you go to ready.gov, their guidance is, kind of peaks out at a few days of readiness, and they give you a list. So what we want to do is take that ready.gov advice and expand on it. So have what you need to get home across town back home from across town. But once you get home, like the title of the presentation, be ready at home as well. Don't only have 3 days of food. Do you have some place you'd go? Like if you're home and then you're going to go somewhere else? Or when I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, I didn't plan on staying there. I had a place to go. You still need to be able to pack up and figure out, well, if I got to go there on foot, how am I going to get there? We recommend at the foundation that you want to be ready at home for at least 30 days, and that's pretty safe. And and I'll show you guys a way to do it so it doesn't break the bank. When we first started tackling this, and you think about preppers and all kinds of investments, and you start thinking about hundreds or thousands of dollars. We've got a fantastic list by David Winks in our foundation. If you wanted to set up a homestead in the country and basically have a machine, everything you'd needed to just function for years, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm not trying to go there with this talk. I just want to give you that peace of mind. If you buy insurance, it's peace of mind. I look at my insurance premiums. I'm like, I've got supplemental homeowners insurance. I actually used it the other year. The water pipes broke, but do I really need to pay this every month? That's what I'm talking about here, is give yourself some insurance at home. There's some basic categories you've got to think about. And if you think, it's kind of an easy way to think about it. If you think about camping, you'd be camping at home in a way. But speaking of camping, during Hurricane Fran, I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina. We were out of power for about 2 weeks, and still using my AM radio, and they were telling you where to go get ice and things like that. I later became involved with the state of North Carolina, helping them write an annex, like a black sky annex to the state emergency plan, which is not published. They keep it internal, and I don't know if they still have it. But we talked to a lot of the infrastructure owners, and the water utility that supplied the capital was there, and they shared with us that. So this is an anecdotal story. They shared with us that after the hurricane, they were concerned. They had water towers in Raleigh, so usually those towers last 24 to 48 hours normal use. But after a power outage, everybody fills their bathtubs and the pots on their kitchen sink, and it lasts about 6 to 8 hours. So these people, I never interacted with water authority people before. I didn't realize how professional they were and how serious they are about their jobs, because they know lives depend on it. Firefighters depend on it too. So they were in a race to get that water pressure, get those towers refilled. After and they did it, but it wasn't potable, so we had boil water alerts and things like that. But the water pressure was there, so if a fire was happened, they could, the firefighters were provisioned. But they put out a survey. This is what the story they told us, to all of their customers after that hurricane. They just, it was like a little postcard survey. You just fill it out and throw it back in the mail. And they would just wanted to know, have you ever been camping in your life, ever? Any kind of camping, even in an RV, luxury RV. And their assumption was, if you've ever been camping, you know what potable water is versus non-potable, or that means water that's safe to drink or water that's not safe to drink. And if you haven't been camping, you probably don't know. And I grew up mostly in the country. I was in the Boy Scouts and the Marine Corps, so I knew what it was. So I thought, who doesn't? But over 95% of the respondents had never been camping one night in their life in the capital city, not once. So they just didn't have a sense of, hey, I can't just drink that water in the puddle. I just can't pour it through a coffee filter and I'm okay. So I'm going to get into more of that. Water is so critical, and you can get so very sick from drinking bad water. So there's different contamination types, and I don't want to be too boring here, but just to give you the general sense, there's natural contamination, like there's dirt, to use common, like bacteria, viruses, and parasites. And then there's man-made contamination. So there's a lot of, you don't realize it, but our sewage goes back in the rivers we pull water from, and all the pharmaceuticals that aren't fully processed by our body go through that sewer treatment plant, and they go right back in the river. So a lot of birth control, hormones, all kinds of other medications, drugs, cities that use a lot of cocaine or methamphetamine or fentanyl, that goes right back into the river, right through the sewer. So if you're pulling water out of a river, you've got all that in the river. Industrial solvents, fuels, etc. There's a trail in North Carolina called the I think the Sea to Summit or Mountains to Sea Trail, and it passes through Raleigh next to the reservoir there, the Falls of News Reservoir. And I bought a book on how to hike that trail, and it said, do not pull water from the reservoir. It's not safe with your hiking filter. That's why we've put water fountains there. And the reason was all these things I'm talking about. So you're in this beautiful reservoir. There's people boating on it and swimming in it, and this nice trail along it. But if your camping filter won't won't pull that stuff out. So you need to know where to draw water safely, and the kinds of filter you have matters. So most hiking and backpacking filters, which I recommend, only filter for this natural stuff. If you want to pull out more of this heavy duty stuff, you've got to make sure that's the kind of filter you're buying, and they cost a lot more. Um, and I've got a countertop filter that filters all this out. The kind you buy to improve the flavor of your water and get rid of the chlorine smell, don't do all this. Read the label. Um, and then know where to draw water. You want to draw it upstream from yucky things. Um, you can dig a scout hole next to a stream or pond so that there's some natural filtration through the soil, and then pre-filter to get the big stuff out before you run it through your hiking filter, because you want to preserve the life of that filter. You'll clog it up and you'll use it up. And if we're talking about a black sky event, you can't go to the store and buy another one. You're kind of stuck with what you have. Um, okay, so we kind of covered that. We recommend 30 days of readiness as your goal. People don't really take it seriously for a few days. If you're going after a 30-day aim, then you're going to start thinking more strategically. And I'm going to show you that if you can do 30 days, you can do 90, and it's not going to break the bank. But just in general, these are the categories again. So if you're thinking about your car, these are things you want in there. There's in my mind, a lot of debate on how much water a person really needs per day. You're not going to drink a gallon a day if you think about it. Maybe you'll give yourself a tiny little sponge bath. But if you're cooking and you're cooking noodles or dry rice, you're gonna use more water than you think, and then you're going to wash the dishes because you need to maintain your hygiene. You want to wash your hands, all the things you worried about during COVID. So you'll need more water than you think. Um, I'm not going to bore you guys by reading these things verbatim. I'll go over the big categories. You can download it yourself. So I recommend that you plan for 2 days in a get-home bag. And again, it's those same categories that we keep talking about: water, hygiene, transportation, shelter, food, medical, communications, safety, and cash. You can read these details yourself. You'll see as I extend this out, the categories stay the same. The details just get longer. Expedition bag, I'm calling it that because it makes me think about the Marine Corps. Can you last 5+ days? Could you go hiking on the Appalachian Trail or some other place with no resupply? How long can you last? And if you're really on the move, you need a lot of calories per day. If it's cold out, you need even more. You'll start to need to be able to cook your food or create hot water, etc. So it becomes a bigger load. Honestly, if I'm taking a long road trip in the car and I'm going to visit family, I've got this in my car, enough for everybody in the car. There's a link here. I think now this website is down, but it's provided a good list. This guy has this is a list for a bug out bag, but I always ask the question: if you're bugging out, where are you going, and what makes you think you have a chance of getting there? You can, you'll be lucky to get home in a black sky event, much less really bug out, unless you've got a good plan on how to get there. Okay, longer term. This is a list of those videos that are on the website. I, just doing my homework when I prepared this slide deck, this was kind of a surprise to me. This is from 23, so now it's a few years old. But even back in March, so 3 years ago, look at these statistics. People preparing for a doomsday scenario. Look at 18 to 24. This blew my mind. 59% are thinking they got to be ready. A little bit less in the older ones, and then even the oldest ones, but it's kind of consistent. Well, the older ones are even less consistent, I guess, because they have more faith in the infrastructure. They've been more accustomed to it. So I guess the trust level decreases as you get younger. Just thought that was an interesting statistic. Okay, and just remember, this is the trap. We're not talking about ice storms. I'm not talking about hurricanes. I'm talking about something that happens to us because an adversarial nation did it on purpose, most likely using proxy forces so that we're not going to fire nukes at them. Because if China just said, ha ha, we're going to shut down your power, your water, and all your banking and your telecommunications, probably going to be nuclear missiles in the air. But if they gave Iran the keys to that, and Iran used proxies plus physical attacks on this country, who are we going to point the finger at? And so that's the way the world's going right now. That seems to be more and more of a risk. Okay, so just remember what you have right now may be all you're going to have for a while. And 3 days goes pretty fast. So just as a reminder, these threats were real years ago. What's different now, and I tell my audiences, what's different today is the world's different. I was just giving these classes 10 months ago at my church, and gosh, look at what's changed. Now look at what's happening. Are things accelerating? It seems like they are. Um, we are truly vulnerable. If you watch the videos on the foundation website, just watch those videos. They're all pretty short. We really are vulnerable, and ask yourself why your politicians aren't saying this to you. They're being briefed. Trust me,
Right.
because we're briefing them. We're briefing them. Why aren't they saying it to you? And why isn't the news media saying it to you? What's going on? And here's a timeline. Um, please focus on the word notional. This timeline, which means I made it up based on people I've talked to. Okay, this mostly based on the work I did with the state of North Carolina. But if we have a nationwide grid down event, in the first 12 hours, we're going to lose water pressure like I described. If you're on a well, you're going to lose water pressure pretty much as soon as you lose power. You'll have your little bladder tank in your house, but it won't last long. Now, after 4 days, I learned this working with North Carolina. I didn't know this. If you think about sewage, what's it full of? It's full of toilet. This is a napkin, but it's full of toilet paper. It's fiber, and when it's not being pumped, it settles. And what's cardboard? It's fiber, it becomes cardboardy. It settles down in the bottom of that sewer pipe, and then there's a layer of that fiber that becomes so stiff that after 4 days, those pumps will never pump again. So if we don't get the power back on within 4 days to a sewer lift station, because it's not gravity fed, they're pumping this sewage uphill, miles and miles. If they don't get those pumps running, they'll never run. A lot of them will never run again. They have to be replaced. So meanwhile, if people filled up their bathtubs or they're getting water out of the local ditches, they're still flushing their toilets. It's going down the drain, gravity fed. It's going to hit where these pumps are, and it's going to back up. And it's going to back up out of the manhole covers and in your house. If you're in a low-lying area, if you live at the bottom of a hill, everybody upstream is flushing their toilet, and it's going to back up all those pipes, and it's going to come out of your floor drains. True. Okay, by 4 days, most people are going to be out of their 3 days of food. If they've got water, people think they're smart buying a few gallons of water. But if you're kind of camping at home and you're washing dishes and you're boiling rice or noodles, you're going to need a gallon or two a day per person. By 10 days, we've seen what happens. Think of Katrina. You're going to start having some people figuring they got to go get what they need, and they're going to go to the stores, etc. Maybe not so much to your house, but they're going to go to the stores. And who's going to go to work? I'm giving it 10 days, probably sooner. Is the sheriff's staff going to show up? Is the mayor's staff going to show up? Are the electrical line workers going to show up if there's nothing really to repair and there's no fuel left in their trucks? People just aren't going to go to work anymore. Who's going to be at the grocery store even if you have cash? So by 12 days, healthcare facilities, if they've got 2 weeks or so of fuel, they're going to be out of generator fuel. So the hospitals are going to go dark. And they're probably going to be full and maxed out by people that have been drinking bad water and have a lot of diarrhea. By then, you're going to have people that are drinking bad water because they're thirsty from drinking bad water and having diarrhea. It's going to get worse. Our country doesn't understand that kind of sanitation. I'll tell another personal anecdote. So when I was in the Marine Corps, I was on an amphibious ready group, and we went to the Mediterranean. We would do port calls. We pulled into Sicily, and the medical staff gets up and they give you the disease brief, and I'm thinking, well, wait, I have nothing to worry about. It's Europe. And they said, you're going to see all these people fishing in the canals and walking in the canals, and their dogs are going to be in the canals, their kids are going to be in the canals. They said, if you get 3 drops of that water on you, you need to report right back, and we're going to quarantine you for 3 days. So I was like, what? And they said they're used to. It's like you hear the story Montezuma's, or this frame, the saying Montezuma's revenge if you drink the
Right.
water in Mexico City. There's all this flora in the water there. Their systems are used to it, but we are so sanitary. We're so hyper sanitary in the United States that our gut bacteria isn't. We can't do it. You can't just go from what we're used to now to drinking out of the ditches or out of the neighbor's pond, like people can in other countries, or like our predecessors did here. It's going to make you really sick, and I can tell you from experience. I've done that camping as a kid, teenager in high school, thinking, "Oh, this water's clear," and I couldn't stand up straight for 3 days. I know what it feels like. Um, Grocery store distribution centers keep about 2 weeks of food. So they have warehouses in major cities, and they resupply the local stores. If they're still functioning or people know where they're at, they're going to be basically empty of food and looted, and all the perishables will be rotten by then anyway within 2 weeks. So we can start thinking we're going to have some significant civil disorder with whoever can still walk. They're going to be super hungry. Imagine if you don't eat for a day or two, you've been drinking bad water. I mean, people are going to be not in good shape. So by 28 days, we're going to have notable malnutrition. We're going to have a lot of people dying from waterborne disease and probably loss of civil governance. So that's not a good story. Now I'm going to add in some layers in the next slide. So this is a little bit more detail. So you've been given the kind of the what's in it for you in your neighborhood. But really, on day one, chemical plants and refineries are going to catastrophically fail, and they're going to release a lot of chemistry, especially if they're upriver. And chemical plants are on rivers because they use it for cooling and they need the water for their processes, and they discharge it into rivers. If they have a catastrophic failure, and I spent 15 years before I got into high tech doing environmental work. I've audited a lot of factories. They've got berms around them, but those berms are only designed to handle 1/3 of their chemistry if they've got big above ground tanks. The assumption is emergency responders are going to get there fast enough and stop the problem before it overflows. We have a catastrophic failure, so a lot of this stuff's going to get into the very rivers that people are going to go to drink from. Um, okay, so most cell phone service is going to stop. If there's still batteries or generators at cell towers and say your cell phone works, after 4 days, it's they'll run out of power and they're not going to work anymore. Um, Nuclear power plants. We do not have a national repository for nuclear waste in the United States. So nuclear waste is stored at licensed facilities like nuclear power plants. The one closest to me, the Sharon Heron nuclear plant, not only stores its waste, it stores a lot of other nuclear waste, like from the hospitals and from et cetera. What I'm most worried about is those fuel rods. Those fuel rods are coated in zirconium, and they're still hot, but they're no longer the right temperature or perfect enough to use in a Westinghouse designed nuclear power plant. So they're stored in these big pools of water for a long time so they can degrade and cool down. That water is pumped and it evaporates, it's refilled. These systems are run on grid power. They're not run on local power in the plant for safety reasons. So if the plant goes down, they all still run. If the grid's down for a long time, the nuclear power plant's going to go into emergency shutdown. It can't power its own campus anyway by design on purpose. The grid power's not there. The diesel generators run out, and these water pools are going to start to heat up. And the bottom line, by 28 days, they're going to evaporate, and they're going to start igniting. They're close enough that without that water circulating, they will self-ignite. The zirconium will catch on fire. Look this up. I'm not making it up. And so you'll have something like Fukushima. You'll have a plume coming out of them that'll go about 55, 60 miles downwind. I live 12 miles from Sharon Harris nuclear power plant. The wind usually blows away from me. But okay, so we're going to now the next slide gets into what China and Iran care about. When can our military be harmed by all of this? This is the geostrategic piece. So in about 12 days, most military bases, just like your home, I know I was in the Marine Corps. I was a logistics officer in the Marine Corps. Military bases don't keep 3 years of food.
Mm-mm.
They have trucks. They have trucks rolling in there every day with food. They're feeding all those people every day. There's about 40,000 combat Marines at Camp Lejeune. So that's 120,000 meals a day. 120,000 meals a day coming in for those chow halls. Fresh groceries. They've got some refrigeration. They don't they don't have years worth. Plus, you've got all the families living off base and on base. They're just using the grocery stores. So, just from a food perspective alone, but there's no power, they can't do their job. So, we're not going to be deploying people. You can't call people at home and say, "Why aren't you here?" It's we're put out of business. And by the way, too, when you think about Taiwan, if you've been following more news than you see on TV, but if you actually look stuff up or get some news feeds, subscribe to them. China's been practicing these naval exercises around Taiwan they're practice blockades, where they can basically seal off commercial shipping to Taiwan. Guess I'll tell you, Taiwan only keeps about 3 weeks of fuel on the island for all of their power plants, and then they're out of fuel. So all China has to do is put a naval blockade on Taiwan for 3 or 4 weeks, and Taiwan goes dark. This is why, if you think about, it's the infrastructure wars that I'm most worried about versus the kinetic wars. Yeah, we're going after Iran kinetically, but Taiwan, you just blockade them for 3 4 weeks, and us, you just attack our grid remotely with cyber or with some of your 18,000 proxies.
Yep.
Um, okay, any questions? Anybody that we ought to go to?
I I put the links in the to the videos and to the resources in there and in the chat. Let's look up here. I heard slash read that the Iranians started off their negotiations with us last year, telling us that they already had enough 60% enriched uranium to build 9/11 warheads. This was their opening position statement. So, yeah.
I think that's Fred. Yeah, Fred. You know, these are the same guys whose proxies blew up the Marine Corps barracks in Lebanon. These are the same guys that funded Hamas, which did just those horrible, horrible things to Israeli civilians and babies. This, what do you think would stop them from launching nukes at us just because? Just because. So my thinking is, why wouldn't they? Not why would they? Why wouldn't they?
Why wouldn't I?
They want to bring on the a lot of Christians want to bring the second coming of Christ. They want to accelerate that by manipulating world events, and these guys, in my opinion, they want to bring their prophet back,
Mm-hmm. The
and
Mahdi.
that's the way to do it. So
Yeah.
for them, it's a holiness. When you think about, you watch TV and you see all these choirs of children singing in a church choir, and they look angelic, and everybody, that feeling is how these guys feel about killing us.
Yes.
That that to them it's literally an act of worship. These are the Islamist extremists. I'm not talking about everybody that says they're Muslim, but these extremists, for them, it's how they pursue holiness.
Yeah.
I just
And
say for the record, the guy that stopped the Bondi shooting was a Muslim. So I'm not saying that's what they're all like, but
right.
these extremists are.
Right, and that's a good differentiation is there's majority of them are wonderful people. It's just that small little fraction of
Yeah,
extremists that, it doesn't take many. But Lola says water is the new oil. Yes, I would agree with that. Um,
it, it is. That's why Israel has one of the reasons Israel has the Golan Heights, because it supplies their watershed.
Yep.
Um, so this slide here is kind of self-explanatory. There was a study done by the National Infrastructure Advisory Council. How long could your business or organization function if the water stopped? And none of them last a day. So they're all degraded. And the biggest reason is when if you really read the report, people go to work, they need to go to the bathroom. And so if you've got no water, you can't use your toilet. So they're going to leave. So I guess you could last longer um, in a lot of cases, but for office workers in particular, it's for sanitation reasons. This is a chart coming out of one of the books that a lot of the people in this foundation contributed to back when we were very involved with InfraGard, and it just lists the equipment at risk based on different threats. But this is the kind of stuff, if you were an adversary and you were trying to plan a complicated attack on us, through EMP or cyber or physical attack plus cyber, which I think is that combo is the most likely. You could stack up your plan this way, and it's not like we're revealing some kind of secret. This is common sense stuff. So this is how an adversary would think. We need to think like they do so we can think about our vulnerabilities. Um, okay, so being ready at home. We've talked about water. You definitely want to think about your meds on your first aid. This is Alexa Pure. This is what I have for a countertop. Gets rid of a lot of the man-made stuff and forever chemicals. Think about your meds. Think about your pets. And this is not my grandmother's basement, but it wasn't as pretty. But I grew up with a grandmother that canned all summer long and with no air conditioning. And she would say, Stevie, go down the basement and fetch me a jar of beans. And this was just there was walls of stuff. And people don't do that anymore. Okay, so I suggest you think 30 days and you aim for being able to get all the way to a year in kind of a light way. So we've talked about 24 hours. Think about 3 days, expand it to 10, 30 days to a year. And a lot of these details, you've already got some of at home. You're just expanding on it. Um, but let's think about the food cost. What's the biggest expense if you're trying to last a year? If you go buy these pallets of food or these 20-year shelf life things, and you want to last 90 days at home, you're starting to talk about some money, especially if you want to have a year's worth of food. So I thought, why don't we look at rice and beans? What do the poorest people in the world eat?
Rice and beans.
And my wife, she cooks beans once a week. She cooks in the slow cooker, awesome beans with ham and all kinds of stuff.
Mhm.
It's amazing. A little bag of beans is just like $1, and dried beans. And so I ran some numbers, and just to show you the calculations, you can feed yourself with rice and beans and have pretty good nutrition for a month per person for $84 a head, rice and beans. So about 25 pounds of rice, 25 pounds of beans. So for the price of a nice dinner, a decent dinner out for two people is about $100, right? With appetizers, dessert. If you buy a drink, you're going to spend $100 with tip at a nice place, easy. For less than that, you're feeding one person a month. That's 30 days. It's $1,000 a year. And just run some more numbers. I thought, what about corn? I'm borderline hypoglycemic, so I don't want too much rice. I do better on cornbread. If we talk about corn, just run the numbers here. It's a little bit more, and here the number popped up a little bit. I think my initial number was a little low, but $94 with rice and beans, 105 with cornmeal and beans. You need, um, I think you can get a better nutritional balance if you go with cornmeal and beans versus white rice. Just a note, brown rice goes rancid. It's got more oil in it. The white rice lasts longer. So your concern there is mildew and bugs, but it can last a long time. Just a personal note, I had some dehydrated camping food that I bought at Walmart. I found it in my garage. I went on a solo hiking trip about 6 years ago to the North Carolina mountains, and and the package had been unbroken. I thought I'm going to try this package on my hike, and it was just a dehydrated meal like beef stroganoff or something. And I ate it. It was just dehydrated, and the flavor was like cardboard, but I had no ill effect. So a lot of the when you see an expiration date on things that are dried, it's it's usually for your user experience. It's not that it becomes toxic. Okay, there's guidance in here on hiking filters that are good for removing chemical contamination. Here's some books I think are worth reading. You can supplement cornmeal and beans or rice and beans with foraging and medicinal plants and herbs, herbal antibiotics. I have fun collecting in the woods around me. Tree moss, this is old man's beard. It's a natural antibiotic and anti-inflammatory stuff. And I tell you, it does work. I've used it on tick bites, and it heals them up very quickly. I'm kind of closing out here, but take action at home. Just think for $100 a person, you can feed people for a month, and just rotate your stock. Start using it. Um, and If enough of us do this, it inoculates the nation. So if there's a patriotic urge, why would an adversary try to take us out if we're more self-sufficient at home? It kind of takes that off the table for them. So, you can do this on the cheap, and think about your community and how you could organize people. Essentially, it's like a co-op. I found with my local group, um, we had about 45 attending until most people said, yeah, I'm ready for 30 days at home. And then attendance really dropped. And so just expect that. Most people think, all right, I'm good to go. That's my insurance policy. I've got my house ready for 30 days. Most people aren't going to, or they know how to do it, extend that out per month. But I found it's a lot harder to get people to start to organize in a community way to say, yeah, we're going to focus on more than just my house and my immediate neighbors and what we have. We're not going to try to do more than that. We're not going to create a stockpile of food at the local church or community center. We're not going to do things like that. That's a bigger lift, and I haven't cracked the code on that. Okay, let me see. Lastly, there's a paper I put together this week. It's being reviewed right now, internal to the foundation. I'm going to post it on our website. But the instability of the world right now has got me the most concerned. It's not just Iran. I've talked a bit about Iran and China, but you've got Russia in the mix and North Korea in the mix. Now these people have all been talking to each other. Now Venezuela's out, right? Venezuela was one of them. People, well, why are we being mean to Venezuela? Well, they were not innocent guys. They were part of this, and all of these entities think in terms of the use of proxy forces and how to leverage each other towards their common goal, which is we're in their way. They'd have freedom to do a lot more if we weren't around. So we'll put this out, but we've got this Iranian fatwa. That's a big deal. We've got domestic sleeper cell networks. And I'll just review this a little bit. More reinforcement as to why we ought to care about being ready at home. This binding fatwa. This is big. This is like the Pope. Imagine the Pope.
Yeah.
We're Western, so we think. Imagine the Pope getting up in the Vatican and telling every Catholic to go kill people and blow stuff up. Just think about that. That's what happened. Or imagine Billy Graham getting up and telling every Baptist that it's time to go please God and go kill people. That's what they did in Iran. Fortunately, human nature being what it is, most people aren't that way. But they just want to get that little percent that wants to be that way anyway, that's got something wrong in their head. They want to give them that reason. There's a $40 million plus assassination bounty on President Trump. Activated sleeper networks. I didn't make this up. This is all footnoted.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Wow.
This is all footnoted. Um, there's documented we've proven they've gained operational control of U.S. water and power systems.
Yep.
Okay. So they've established their own operations room just right before we attacked them. China, their Volt Typhoon program, they are pre-positioned. Their hackers are their hackers can, just like we logged into this, they can log into our electrical infrastructure, financial, telecommunications, water
Mhm.
from China through the internet. They don't. They're there. They maintain administrator privileges. That's why that's the FBI. I'm quoting FBI Director Wray's testimony to Congress. The question is, why haven't they? Because the time isn't right in their mind. That's
Right.
a whole nother talk. They're on a big rebound from being crushed in 1840 and the opium and all that, and it's payback time for them in terms of history. They're actively sharing. This is ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, satellite, other information with Iran. But I think they're kind of a constraint on Iran. They don't want to fully help Iran. So I think for now, China is a bit of a moderator. They're not. If China wanted to take us out, we we wouldn't have the internet and electricity right now to do this meeting. So Russia, they're pretty busy with the Ukraine, as we know, but they're providing some pretty good intel as well to the Iranians. Um, and then North Korea, I was wondering what's North Korea? What could they be doing? Well, they've got their own crypto networks and they can funnel money. They're big into hacking and stealing money. So think about in a way North Korea is like the mafia of the nations. And if you're going to pay your 40 million for killing Trump, from what I've looked up, it'd probably be paid through a North Korean financial structure. Um, and we've got a partial government defunding going on. So the CISA is our big IT security group inside DHS. DHS isn't being funded. They're only at 38% staffing.
Yep.
And they were already inadequate. If you watch congressional testimony, they weren't keeping up with the Chinese when they're fully staffed. So
That
there's a big gap.
that has me more concerned than anything else. Is the destaffing that's going on and no backfill, even with leadership that has been let go.
Yeah, and um, I've got a question for you, Maria, and I know you'll have an answer for it. So, um, so I know you've done some investigation into the transformers that are manufactured in China that have been shipped here and installed all throughout our grid. So could you just, so it's not just me talking, could you share the results you're able to share and how about that?
Yeah. Well, they there are backdoors in the transformer, specifically one that was confiscated at in the port of New Orleans and directly taken to Sandia Labs in New Mexico and completely taken apart. Um, the most of the back doors actually come from third-party sensors and such that are either internet connected and or 4G LTE connected. And so what we have is the ability of a foreign adversary, whether it be China, the transformer did come from China, and or other proxies to infiltrate our transformers. I wouldn't say it was easily. It definitely takes a skill set, but the Chinese army, I would say Iran too, has a very sophisticated cyber offensive force. So and we know in our solar systems as well, especially in Texas, the inverters are also infiltrated. The infiltration is really deep. I can't really discuss too much more than that,
I know, I know.
but it's there. It's there.
They're there. So yeah, I just want to just assure the audience this is not. I don't have my tinfoil hat on. This is all researched. And when we talk about things, we do our homework. Like I'll just go to the end of this thing. You'll see. We've got footnotes. We pursue academic rigor with our statements, and so I may have overly generalized or mischaracterized things a little bit, but the bottom line is this is a body of conclusions and facts that um, I am a beneficiary of being part of the Foundation for Infrastructure Resilience, and we've got a lot of subject matter experts there that um, that keep us informed. The I see Fred Farrar said, yeah, thousands of Kurdish fighters are on the offensive against Iran. That's a good thing. Um, I've been wondering, if we're not going to put boots on the ground there, I'm sure we've been hoping and making overtures to the Iranian military to see if any of them are going to peel off on our side of the equation. The Kurds, having the Kurds there is good. Just, I guess, more information for the audience. Dictatorships keep parallel armies. I'll go ahead and stop sharing. They they keep parallel armies. They have the regular army, then they'll have one
Mhm.
that's loyal to the dictator himself, and and so that for Iran, that's the IR IR. Where's my acronym? It's the IRGC, Republican Guard Corps, Iranian Republican Guard Corps, IRGC. If you think to an easy model, in Nazi Germany, there was the General German Army, then there was the SS. The SS was loyal to Hitler,
Mhm.
and they were the ones that did the darkest things. And so in Iran, they've got the IRGC, which controls, and they're placed in their top industry, and that's who's been controlling their proxy forces. That's the interface there. So they're the ones that are the extremists. So I've been hoping that we could get some of their regular army, to come over on our side. That would be huge. It'd be a real multiplier. But it's good that we're supplying the Kurds, and they're pretty motivated. Okay, uh, Maria, back to you.
Oh, okay. Well, I thank you, Steve. This has been an excellent and timely, uh, just incredible information you shared. And I did post all the links to the FIR website, but it's really easy to remember. FIR, FIR foundation. If you just type that from the homepage, you can easily navigate to the presentation that Steve put up, and as well as other resources. Go to the video page and watch all those videos. We can't share them on the podcast without getting a strike of. So we tried last time, and they cut us off midstream. Which actually worked out okay, because I think with everything that has been happening in the world in the last week, this has been a more timely podcast for
Yeah,
encouraging people to prepare, to prepare.
yeah. Be ready at home. Just be
Mhm.
ready. We've got a very motivated stack of adversaries. We're
We do.
in their way, and you may not. Well, for some of them, you may be the target. They do want to
Mhm.
cause you direct harm, but strategically, if they want to stop our military from deploying, particularly the ground forces, or resupplying the ones we've already got overseas, they need to turn the power off here. And I'm sharing with you that they can,
They can. Yeah.
by more than one way.
Yeah.
You know, by more than one way. It doesn't have to be near science fiction type thing with electromagnetic pulse coming from outer space. They can do it with a few hundred guys that go to Walmart and buy hunting rifles.
Yep. Agreed.
Uh,
Agreed.
so it's not a question of could they or can they. It's will they?
When? Yeah, will they? And when?
Will
And
they?
when?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think there's a strategic appointed date and time to, in my humble opinion. That's
I think this fatwa thing has got me rattled.
yeah.
The issuing that fatwa is that's a whole different ballgame. And now you've got all kinds of individuals. There's the organized sleepers. There's also the lone wolves. You've got all kinds of people that are going to do it because it's their version of singing in a choir.
Yep.
And the
Agreed.
so okay, I've enjoyed it. Thanks for the
Yeah,
chance
thank
to share.
you. Thank you. And if you would like to support this podcast, there's a GoFundMe link in the description of this video. All support is welcome. I'm trying to bring these to you on every week, and as also certain guests want to speak to the public, and this is a good forum because what we're presenting is industry experts who really know their thing, and that's what I want to get is this information out to everybody. You know, we all know that people perish for lack of knowledge, so this is a good venue for that. And so thank you, Steve. And we look forward to having you back and in the future. And we thank everyone for watching. And we look forward to having you back on next week. Take care.